My name is Rose, and I am 66 years old. Throughout my 30-year career as a child life specialist, I devoted myself to compassionately helping children navigate their most frightening moments, teaching them that even in the darkest times, love and understanding could heal the deepest wounds. I raised my son Michael as a single mother, weaving together my professional wisdom with boundless maternal devotion to give him every advantage life could offer. When my granddaughter Lily came into our world 6 years ago, my heart overflowed with the joy I had dreamed of since Michael's birth. I cherished every moment of caring for her, watching her bright eyes discover the world, believing wholeheartedly in the sacred power of family connection and unconditional love. Then the unthinkable happened. A severe car accident left me hospitalized for weeks, fighting for my life, while machines monitored my fragile recovery. But the physical trauma was nothing compared to what awaited me when I finally returned home. During what should have been a joyful reunion, my daughter-in-law Jennifer unleashed a cruelty so calculated and devastating that it left me questioning everything I thought I knew about human nature. In front of my shocked eyes, she coached my precious Lily to repeat words that will haunt me forever. Mommy wished you died in the car crash so you wouldn't bother anyone anymore. When I turned to Michael for protection and support, my own son betrayed me with words that cut deeper than any physical wound. You're a toxic, manipulative old woman with no humanity, Jennifer screamed, while Michael nodded his agreement like a puppet, following her cruel script. In one devastating moment, my love was reframed as manipulation, my professional competence dismissed as interference, my very humanity questioned and denied. I felt utterly abandoned, profoundly isolated, my life's foundation of family love crumbling beneath the weight of such calculated malice. Yet even as overwhelming despair threatened to consume my spirit, something deeper began to awaken within me. The same unwavering commitment to protecting children that had driven my entire career ignited a cold, determined fury that surprised me with its intensity. What Jennifer, Michael, and even little Lily, in her innocent confusion, could never suspect was the depth of my preparation and documentation. Decades of professional training had taught me to observe, record, and preserve truth, especially when children's welfare was at stake. Hidden throughout my home were discreet security cameras that had captured Jennifer's chilling conversations, including her explicit statement of wishing for my death and Michael's spineless agreement to her psychological warfare. My trusted child psychologist ally stood ready with professional insights that would expose their manipulation tactics. This time, their campaign of cruelty would not merely devastate me in silence. It would unravel completely, revealing the shocking depths of their inhumanity while restoring my rightful place in Lily's life, and proving that truth, no matter how buried, will always triumph over betrayal and calculated deception. The homecoming I had dreamed about during those endless hospital nights became a nightmare that shattered my understanding of family loyalty forever. 3 days had passed since my discharge, 3 days of careful recuperation in the home where I had raised Michael and prepared so lovingly for my granddaughter's visits. My body was still fragile from the accident that had nearly claimed my life, but my heart was full of anticipation for seeing Lily again. When Jennifer arrived with my granddaughter that Tuesday afternoon, I noticed immediately that something was wrong. Lily, usually exuberant and affectionate during our reunions, seemed subdued and anxious, clinging to her mother with unusual intensity. Her bright eyes, which normally sparkled with joy when she saw me, were clouded with confusion and what looked disturbingly like fear. "Hello, sweetheart," I said gently extending my arms to the child who had always run to me with unrestrained love. Grandma Rose missed you so much while I was in the hospital. Did you miss me too? Instead of the enthusiastic hug I expected, Lily burst into uncontrollable sobs, her small body shaking with distress that seemed far too intense for a simple reunion. Through her tears, she looked at me with an expression that broke my heart, a mixture of love and terror that no child should ever have to experience. Grandma Rose. She whispered, her voice trembling as she struggled with words that were clearly not her own. Mommy said she wished you died in the car crash so you wouldn't bother anyone anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as if the ground had opened beneath me, swallowing everything I thought I knew about my family. The innocent cruelty in Lily's voice, the way she repeated words she clearly didn't understand, the calculated timing of this revelation during my vulnerable recovery. It all pointed to a level of manipulation that was both sophisticated and breathtakingly heartless. Jennifer's response was not shock embarrassment or any attempt to deny what her daughter had just revealed. Instead, she looked at me with cold satisfaction, as if Lily's words had accomplished exactly what she intended. Well, Jennifer said with chilling composure, children do repeat what they hear. Maybe this is a good time to establish some new boundaries, Rose. You've always been too involved in our family life, and Lily's getting old enough to understand when adults are being inappropriate. The calculated cruelty in her tone was unmistakable. This wasn't an accidental revelation or a child's misunderstanding. This was a deliberate psychological attack, timed to coincide with my physical weakness and emotional vulnerability. Jennifer had used my beloved granddaughter as a weapon against me, corrupting an innocent child's mind with hatred and death wishes. Jennifer, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady despite the shock, what you've done to Lily is unconscionable. Using a child to deliver such a cruel message is emotional abuse. As a child life specialist, I've seen the damage this kind of manipulation can cause to a developing mind. But Jennifer's mask of maternal concern was already sliding into place, preparing for the performance that would reframe my legitimate professional concerns as the ravings of an unstable elderly woman. There you go again, she said with practiced exasperation, trying to use your so-called professional expertise to control our family dynamics. Rose, I need you to understand something very clearly. I am Lily's mother, not you. You're just the other grandmother, and frankly, your constant interference is becoming inappropriate. The phrase other grandmother hit me like a physical blow. After 6 years of being Lily's primary caregiver, when Jennifer worked after countless nights of babysitting, story reading, and grandmother-granddaughter bonding, I was being reduced to an irrelevant bystander in my own grandchild's life. You are not to post any photos of Lily on social media without my explicit permission. Jennifer continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering ultimatums. This is my child, not yours, and you're being selfish and manipulative by acting like you have equal rights to her affection. Each word was chosen with surgical precision to inflict maximum emotional damage while establishing Jennifer's absolute authority over my relationship with Lily. She wasn't just setting boundaries, she was systematically dismantling the grandmother-granddaughter bond that had been the greatest joy of my retirement years. You have no humanity to understand what I need as Lily's mother, Jennifer declared with self-righteous indignation. You're too old and too set in your ways to understand modern parenting. Your constant need for involvement is actually harmful to Lily's development. When Michael arrived home from work an hour later, I turned to him with desperate hope that my own son would defend me against his wife's calculated cruelty. Surely the man I had raised with such love and sacrifice would recognize the manipulation taking place and protect both me and his daughter from Jennifer's psychological warfare. Instead, Michael looked at me with a mixture of annoyance and embarrassment, as if I were a troublesome relative who had overstayed her welcome. "Mom, you're being selfish and insensitive," he said, his voice carrying the rehearsed quality of someone who had been coached in what to say. "Jennifer just went through a terrible scare thinking she might lose you in that accident. She's trying to protect Lily from the trauma of almost losing her grandmother, and you're making it all about yourself." The breathtaking inversion of reality in his words left me speechless. Jennifer's expression of death wishes was being reframed as protective parenting, while my legitimate concerns about emotional abuse were characterized as selfish attention-seeking. "You need to respect Jennifer's wishes as Lily's mother." Michael continued, his voice growing sharper with each word. "Stop being so dramatic about normal family boundaries. This is her child, her rules, and you're losing your mind if you think you have the right to interfere with her parenting decisions." The phrase, "losing your mind," sent a chill through me. This wasn't just about establishing boundaries or protecting Lily from trauma. This was the beginning of a campaign to question my mental competence, laying the groundwork for future allegations of instability or dementia. "You have no humanity to understand what Jennifer is going through as a new mother," Michael added unconsciously, echoing his wife's earlier words. "Stop being such a meddling old fool and give our family some space to heal." But Jennifer wasn't finished with her public humiliation campaign. While Michael spoke, she was already orchestrating the next phase of my systematic exclusion. Brenda, Jennifer's mother, had been documenting every moment of Lily's early years with professional quality photographs that she immediately shared across social media platforms. The posts that appeared that evening were designed to maximize my emotional devastation while maintaining an innocent facade. First, grandmother cuddles with my precious Lily after her scary time worrying about Grandma Rose. Brenda wrote beneath a photo of herself holding my granddaughter, "So grateful to be here to provide the stable, loving presence this little angel needs during difficult times." The comment section exploded with supportive messages from friends and family members who had no idea about the psychological warfare being conducted behind the scenes. "What a blessing to have such a devoted grandmother," people wrote. "Lily is so lucky to have Brenda's wisdom and stability. First grandmother moments are the most precious." Each comment felt like another nail in the coffin of my relationship with Lily. Brenda was being celebrated for providing the stability and love that had always been my role, while I was systematically erased from the narrative of my granddaughter's life and recovery. The isolation became complete when Jennifer and Michael implemented what they called necessary healing boundaries, but what I recognized as systematic alienation tactics. Phone calls went unanswered, text messages were ignored, and visits were refused with increasingly elaborate excuses about Lily's emotional state, Jennifer's recovery from the trauma, or their need for family processing time. When I persisted in trying to maintain contact, hoping that time and gentle persistence might restore our relationship, Davies entered the picture with legal threats designed to terrorize me into complete submission. His letter was formal cold and calculated to make any future attempts at grandparent contact seem like criminal harassment. My clients, Michael and Jennifer Thompson, have expressed serious concerns about your inappropriate attempts to interfere with their family's healing process, Davies wrote in language designed to criminalize grandmother love. Your continued attempts to contact them or their minor child after being asked to respect boundaries will be considered harassment and stalking behavior. We are prepared to seek a restraining order if this pattern of inappropriate contact continues. As I sat in my empty house that evening, surrounded by photos of Lily and gifts I had been preparing for her return from my hospital stay, I felt the weight of complete isolation settling over me like a suffocating blanket. The joy I had felt anticipating our reunion had been poisoned by Jennifer's systematic cruelty and Michael's spineless complicity. But buried beneath my overwhelming pain, something else was stirring. The same analytical mind that had successfully protected countless children from psychological manipulation during my professional career was beginning to recognize patterns in Jennifer's behavior that went far beyond normal protective parenting. This was something more calculated, more systematic, and potentially more vulnerable to professional analysis than Jennifer realized. The weeks following my banishment from Lily's life brought escalating psychological warfare that revealed the true scope of Jennifer's campaign against me. What I had initially hoped might be temporary stress-related behavior was emerging as a sophisticated plan to erase me completely from my granddaughter's existence while positioning Jennifer and her mother as Lily's only meaningful family connections. Jennifer's demands became increasingly unreasonable and comprehensive, designed not just to limit my access to Lily, but to eliminate it entirely. She refused to allow me any contact with my granddaughter, even supervised visits in her own home where she could control every interaction. When I suggested meeting at neutral locations like parks or family restaurants, she claimed I was being manipulative and refusing to respect her authority as Lily's mother. But more devastating than the exclusion itself was Jennifer's systematic destruction of my history with their family. During one of my few permitted phone calls with Michael, I asked about the handmade quilts and toys I had spent months creating for Lily's nursery, each piece sewn with grandmother love and anticipation for our shared future. "Oh, those old things," Michael said dismissively, his voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who had been coached to devalue my contributions. Jennifer decided they weren't really appropriate for Lily's current developmental stage. She preferred more modern educational toys that would stimulate cognitive growth. "I think we donated your stuff to charity." The callous disposal of months of my labor, each stitch sewn with grandmotherly devotion, revealed the depth of Jennifer's campaign to erase my presence from Lily's environment. She wasn't just excluding me from the present. She was systematically eliminating all evidence of my intended role in Lily's future. The photo erasure was even more calculated and painful. I discovered that Jennifer had removed every trace of me from Lily's bedroom and play areas. The pictures of Michael as a child that I had given them to inspire their own parenting journey had been replaced with photos of Brenda's family. My professional certificates and awards, which had once hung proudly in their guest room as evidence of my childcare expertise, had disappeared entirely. When I mentioned this during a brief conversation with Michael, he claimed they were redecorating to create a more calming environment for Lily's emotional recovery. But I recognized this as systematic historical revision designed to support Jennifer's narrative that I was just the other grandmother, with no significant role in their family's story. The most chilling insight into Jennifer's true character came when I accidentally overheard a phone conversation she was having while I waited outside their house hoping for just a glimpse of Lily through the window. Her voice, cold and calculating, carried clearly through the open kitchen window. "The old hag thinks she can guilt-trip us into giving her access," Jennifer said with casual venom that made my blood freeze. Lily's mine, not hers. Rose is just the other grandmother, and she needs to accept that her opinion about my parenting doesn't matter anymore. This is what she gets for being so pushy and entitled about her grandmother rights. The calculated cruelty in her voice revealed that this wasn't about protecting Lily from trauma or establishing reasonable boundaries. This was about power control and the systematic humiliation of someone Jennifer viewed as a threat to her absolute authority over her family dynamic. As I stood outside their home, listening to my own daughter-in-law describe me as an old hag whose love for my granddaughter was dismissed as entitlement, I felt something profound shift inside me. The grief and confusion I had been experiencing began to crystallize into a cold understanding of exactly what Jennifer was doing and why. In that moment of devastating clarity, I was forced to confront the most painful sacrifice I had ever made for Michael, a secret I had carried alone for over 20 years. When Michael was 25 and struggling to establish himself in his career, he had developed a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control with terrifying speed. The debts he accumulated totaled nearly $150,000 money he had borrowed from increasingly dangerous sources as his addiction consumed his judgment and moral compass. But the gambling was only the beginning of his problems. Desperate to repay his creditors and avoid the violent consequences of default, Michael had become involved in a sophisticated financial fraud scheme that promised enormous returns, but was actually a money laundering operation for organized crime. When federal investigators began closing in on the operation, Michael faced potential charges for financial crimes that would have resulted in decades in federal prison and the complete destruction of any chance for a normal future. The scandal would have ruined not just Michael's life, but his reputation, his career prospects, and any possibility of the family life he desperately wanted. As a child life specialist with extensive connections in family services, legal advocacy, and child welfare organizations, I understood exactly what needed to be done to save my son from the consequences of his choices. I liquidated my entire retirement account, over $75,000 I had saved through decades of careful planning and professional dedication. But money alone wasn't enough to solve Michael's crisis. I used my professional reputation and network to arrange for evidence to be suppressed, charges to be reduced through plea agreements, and Michael's record to be expunged through a complex series of legal maneuvers that cost me every favor I had accumulated over 20 years of child advocacy work. Most painfully, I convinced several of my wealthy former clients and professional colleagues to quietly contribute to what I called a rehabilitation fund that covered Michael's remaining debts and legal fees. I allowed them to believe they were helping a promising young person overcome temporary difficulties caused by mental health issues, never revealing that this was my own son, whose addiction and criminal involvement had created the crisis. I kept this sacrifice completely hidden from Michael, never wanting him to feel beholden to me or to carry the guilt of knowing how much his freedom and future had cost. I allowed him to believe he had overcome his problems through personal strength, legal technicalities, and his own efforts to change his destructive patterns. Now, watching Jennifer systematically exclude me from Lily's life while Michael stood passively by the irony was unbearable. The son whose future I had purchased with my life savings and professional reputation was allowing his wife to treat me as if I were a dangerous stranger rather than the woman who had saved him from federal prison and social ruin. When I attempted to subtly remind Michael of our bond and my lifelong commitment to his welfare, hoping to rekindle some memory of my devotion without revealing the full extent of my sacrifice, his response was devastating in its complete dismissal of our history. "Mom, you're always trying to make me feel guilty with your so-called sacrifices." He said, his voice filled with the impatience of someone who had been thoroughly coached to respond this way. "Your past choices are your own business, and they don't give you the right to interfere with how Jennifer and I raise our daughter. She says you're trying to manipulate us with guilt trips and emotional blackmail." The words felt like physical blows, not just because Michael was refusing to acknowledge my sacrifices, but because he was reframing them as manipulation tactics designed to control his current behavior. Jennifer had successfully convinced him that my maternal love was actually a form of psychological abuse. Brenda, ever ready to support Jennifer's narrative, added her own psychological diagnosis to my supposed manipulation. "Honestly, Rose," she said during one of the few family gatherings I was still permitted to attend, "we're all getting quite concerned about your mental health. You seem to be developing some paranoid ideas about people not appreciating your contributions. Maybe you should consider talking to a professional about these feelings of entitlement." The suggestion that I needed psychiatric intervention was the final piece of Jennifer's campaign to discredit my competence and authority. By questioning my mental health, she was laying the groundwork for future legal challenges to any grandparent rights I might attempt to assert. But perhaps the cruelest element of this psychological warfare was the way Jennifer had begun coaching my other grandchildren, Ethan and Chloe, to participate in my humiliation. During a family barbecue that I attended only because Michael hadn't yet told me I was banned, I overheard 10-year-old Ethan saying to his cousin, "Grandma Rose is acting weird lately. Mom says she might be getting that disease that makes old people forget things and act crazy." 8-year-old Chloe added with the innocent cruelty that only children can muster, "Yeah, she keeps trying to boss Mom around about Lily when Mom already said no. Maybe she should just die already so everyone can be happy." The words, clearly coached but delivered with childish honesty, revealed how completely Jennifer had poisoned even the youngest family members against me. She wasn't content with excluding me from Lily's life. She was systematically turning my entire extended family into participants in my psychological destruction. The final humiliation came when Jennifer, through Davies, proposed what she called a family healing agreement that was actually a legal trap designed to formalize my exclusion while forcing me to admit incompetence. The proposed contract would require me to permanently relinquish all grandparent visitation rights and submit to a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation designed to prove my mental instability and unfitness for contact with children. In return, Jennifer would graciously allow me to send supervised pre-approved letters to Lily twice a year, letters that would be screened for inappropriate content and emotional manipulation before being shared with her. The agreement was designed to legally establish that I was unfit for unsupervised contact with my granddaughter, while positioning Jennifer as the reasonable party trying to accommodate a mentally unstable relative. As I sat in my empty house that night, legally threatened and systematically isolated from the granddaughter who had been the light of my life, I felt the weight of complete defeat. Jennifer had successfully transformed me from a respected child development professional into a cautionary tale about elderly relatives who couldn't accept appropriate boundaries. But buried beneath my overwhelming pain, the analytical mind that had successfully navigated thousands of complex family situations during my professional career was beginning to recognize something crucial. Jennifer's campaign was too sophisticated, too systematic, and too comprehensive to be the spontaneous behavior of a protective mother dealing with an intrusive relative. This was planned, calculated psychological warfare, and potentially vulnerable to the same kind of professional analysis I had once applied to troubled families in my child advocacy work. The legal machinery that Jennifer and Davies had constructed reached its devastating climax with a document that would forever change my understanding of how completely my family had been turned against me. The restraining order arrived by certified mail on a cold Thursday morning, its official language transforming my grandmother love into a criminal threat. Rose Matthews is hereby permanently prohibited from all contact with minor child Lily Thompson. The order read in cold legal terminology. This includes physical proximity to the child's residence school daycare facilities or any location where the child may reasonably be expected to be present. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and criminal prosecution. But the restraining order went even further than simple contact prohibition. I was legally banned from sending gift cards or letters to Lily. I couldn't attend family gatherings where she might be present. I couldn't even mention her in social media posts or public communications. Jennifer had succeeded in making me legally invisible to my own granddaughter, erasing 6 years of grandmother love with the stroke of a judge's pen. The grounds for the restraining order were a masterwork of character assassination disguised as child protection. Davies had crafted allegations of emotional manipulation, inappropriate boundary violations, and potential psychological harm to the child, based on my attempts to maintain a relationship with Lily after the accident. My professional experience with child development was reframed as obsessive interference with parental authority, and my gifts for Lily were characterized as attempts to manipulate the child's loyalties through material inducement. Most devastating of all, the order included a psychological evaluation requirement that would essentially place my mental competence under court supervision. Any future contact with Lily would depend on my ability to prove my sanity to a system that had already accepted Jennifer's characterization of me as an unstable, obsessive elderly woman whose love had become dangerous. The isolation was swift and comprehensive. I couldn't attend church services where Michael and Jennifer might appear with Lily. I couldn't shop at the stores they frequented or walk in the parks where they might take her for fresh air. Jennifer had succeeded in making me a prisoner in my own community, trapped by the fear that any accidental encounter might result in my arrest and prosecution. But my heart refused to accept this legal banishment as the final word on my relationship with Lily. In my desperation to somehow reach the son I had raised and the granddaughter I adored, I spent weeks carefully assembling a collection of our most precious memories together. I gathered photographs from Michael's childhood, his first steps, his school performances, family vacations, where his laughter had been the soundtrack to my happiest moments as a single mother. I included pictures of Lily from her earliest days, her first smile, her first birthday party in my garden, quiet moments of grandmother-granddaughter bonding that had filled my retirement with purpose and joy. I wrote a letter that poured out 66 years of maternal wisdom and grandmother love, carefully avoiding any mention of the current conflict while emphasizing the unbreakable bonds that should connect families across generations. My dearest Michael and precious Lily, I wrote, "These pictures represent the greatest joys of my life. Michael, you were my miracle baby, my proof that love can overcome any obstacle. Lily, you are the continuation of that miracle, the promise that our family's love will endure through all challenges. I pray that someday these memories will remind you both how much your grandmother loved you, even when she couldn't be there to show it." I left the album on their doorstep late one evening, hoping that seeing our documented history together might soften their hearts or remind them of the woman who had sacrificed everything to give them the best possible lives. For 3 days, I allowed myself to hope that maybe this visual reminder of our bond might crack the wall of manipulation Jennifer had built around my family. Instead, I discovered the album's fate through social media in a post that shattered whatever remained of my faith in my family's capacity for basic human decency. Brenda had photographed my carefully assembled memories scattered across what appeared to be a garbage bag, the pictures torn and some partially burned, creating a scene of deliberate destruction designed for maximum emotional impact. Cleaning out the clutter, Brenda's caption read with casual cruelty that took my breath away. Some people just can't let go of the past and move forward from negativity. Time to focus on healthy relationships and positive energy instead of desperate attempts to manipulate through guilt and false nostalgia. The comments below the post were filled with supportive messages from people who had no idea they were celebrating the destruction of a grandmother's most treasured memories. "Good for you," friends wrote. "Sometimes you have to cut toxic people out of your life completely. Stay strong and protect your family from manipulation." That image of our irreplaceable family history, reduced to literal garbage, broke something inside me that I knew would never fully heal. These weren't just photographs. They were the visual record of relationships that had defined my entire adult life, moments of pure love and connection that could never be recreated or replaced. Michael's final communication confirmed that his transformation from loving son to cruel stranger was complete. His text message arrived at 2 a.m. as if he had been lying awake planning the perfect words to inflict maximum damage. "Consider this closed, Mom. You lose. Don't contact us again, ever. You're causing too much trouble with your obsessive behavior and your pathetic attempts at emotional manipulation. I'm done pretending you were ever anything more than an interfering old woman who can't respect boundaries." The next day, Jennifer escalated her public relations campaign with phone calls to mutual friends and extended family members. Her story was carefully crafted to position me as a mentally unstable elderly woman whose obsession with her granddaughter had become genuinely dangerous. "We're really concerned about Rose's psychological state," Jennifer told anyone who would listen. "She's become completely fixated on Lily to the point where it's affecting her grip on reality. We had to get a restraining order because her behavior was becoming genuinely frightening for our daughter." The narrative was so convincing, so reasonable sounding, that most people accepted it without question. After all, everyone had heard stories about elderly relatives who became difficult or inappropriate as they aged. Jennifer's version of events fit perfectly into existing stereotypes about aging and family dynamics. But in my moment of absolute despair, I was forced to confront the most painful secret of my entire life, a truth I had shared with no one and had hoped to take to my grave. The weight of this secret, combined with everything Jennifer and Michael were putting me through, finally broke my resolve to protect everyone else at the expense of my own well-being. In a moment of raw desperation, I called my trusted family therapist ally and revealed something that would change everything if it ever became public. Lily's birth hadn't been the straightforward, healthy delivery that everyone believed. My granddaughter had been born with a severe, life-threatening genetic condition that required immediate experimental surgery, costing over $150,000. The condition was so rare and complex that standard insurance wouldn't cover the procedures needed to save her life, and the specialists required payment up front before they would even begin treatment. Michael and Jennifer, young and financially struggling, despite Michael's decent job, had no way to afford the treatment their daughter desperately needed. They were facing the impossible choice between watching their child die within her first year of life or accumulating debt that would destroy their financial future for decades. So I had made another impossible sacrifice, liquidating my remaining retirement savings and borrowing against my home to secretly pay for Lily's life-saving surgery. I worked directly with the medical team to create a fiction about unexpected insurance approval and charitable medical foundations that allowed Michael and Jennifer to believe their daughter's treatment had been covered by sources beyond their control. For 6 months, while Lily underwent complex procedures and recovery treatments, I was the one paying every medical bill, covering every specialist consultation funding, every piece of equipment needed to keep my granddaughter alive. I coordinated with doctors' managed insurance claims that I was secretly funding and ensured that Michael and Jennifer never saw the true cost of their daughter's survival. I kept this sacrifice completely hidden because I wanted them to focus on loving and caring for Lily rather than drowning in guilt or financial anxiety. I thought my silence was a gift, a way to protect their family bond and ensure that Lily would grow up in a home free from the stress of overwhelming medical debt. Now, as I sat in my empty house, legally prohibited from seeing the granddaughter whose life I had saved, the cosmic irony was unbearable. The child whose existence I had purchased with my life savings was being kept from me by parents who had no idea how much her survival had cost. The woman they characterized as just the other grandmother was actually the reason their daughter was alive to be fought over. Jennifer's systematic exclusion and Michael's passive complicity weren't just cruel. They were a complete inversion of reality. My inappropriate interference had been the salvation of their family, and my obsessive behavior was nothing more than a grandmother's natural desire to love the child she had literally saved. But buried beneath my overwhelming pain and the devastating irony of my situation, something else was stirring the same professional instincts that had protected countless children during my 30-year career. For the first time since this nightmare began, I started thinking like the child life specialist I had been rather than the heartbroken grandmother I had become. Jennifer's campaign against me was too sophisticated, too systematic, and too comprehensive to be the spontaneous behavior of a protective mother. This was planned psychological warfare, and like all forms of calculated cruelty, it would eventually reveal patterns that could be exposed and challenged by someone who understood child psychology and family manipulation. The restraining order created a psychological prison more suffocating than any physical confinement I had ever experienced. In the weeks that followed, I found myself trapped in a terrifying abyss of isolation, haunted by the monumental secret of Lily's hidden medical history and the life-saving sacrifice I had made in complete silence. Every morning brought the crushing realization that the truth which could vindicate me was the same truth that would destroy the peaceful fiction Michael and Jennifer lived within. The weight of concealing Lily's near-death experience and my financial rescue felt unbearable in my solitude. I would lie awake at night, replaying those horrifying months when my granddaughter hovered between life and death, remembering the desperate consultations with specialists across the country, the sleepless nights spent researching experimental treatments, the quiet conversations with medical billing departments, as I arranged payment for procedures that cost more than most people's annual salaries. That same secret now felt like evidence of my supposed mental instability. How could I explain to anyone that the grandmother they portrayed as dangerously obsessed had actually saved her granddaughter's life? How could I reveal that my inappropriate interference had been the difference between Lily's survival and death? The truth seemed so extraordinary that speaking it aloud would only confirm Jennifer's narrative about my delusional state and grandiose fantasies. But Jennifer and Davies weren't content with my private torment. They escalated their public campaign with surgical precision, targeting the professional reputation I had built over 30 years of dedicated child advocacy. Davies began discreetly contacting child life specialist associations and pediatric hospital networks, spreading carefully crafted concerns about my mental competence and emotional stability. "I'm calling out of professional obligation," Davies told the director of the National Child Life Council during a conversation I later learned about through sympathetic colleagues. "Rose Matthews, one of your long-standing members, appears to be experiencing significant cognitive decline that's manifesting as inappropriate emotional attachments to children in her family. Her recent behavior suggests she may be developing obsessive tendencies that could compromise her judgment regarding child welfare." The campaign was devastatingly effective. My reputation for highly perceptive care and unshakable professional integrity, built over 3 decades of successful child advocacy and satisfied families, was systematically dismantled through whispered concerns and professional warnings. Speaking engagements at pediatric conferences were quietly canceled. Medical organizations removed my name from advisory boards, where I had served with distinction for years. Former colleagues began treating me with the careful sympathy reserved for aging professionals who were losing their grip on reality. Phone calls went unreturned. Invitations stopped arriving, and when I encountered other child life specialists at community events, I could see the doubt in their eyes, mixed with pity for someone who had supposedly been overcome by the emotional instability of advanced age. Rose, one former colleague, said carefully when she encountered me at the pharmacy, "People are saying you've been having some difficulties with family boundaries and professional judgment. Maybe it would be good to take a step back from childcare activities for a while, just to focus on your own well-being and mental health." The financial devastation followed with cruel efficiency. The escalating legal fees from defending myself against Jennifer's visitation termination and her subsequent defamation lawsuit completely drained the modest savings I had left after paying for Lily's medical care. My bank accounts were frozen, pending investigation of financial irregularities in my management of child-related expenses, leaving me without access to money I had earned through decades of honest, compassionate work. The eviction from my cherished home was the culmination of Jennifer's systematic destruction of my life. The house where I had raised Michael as a single mother, where I had prepared a special room for Lily's visits with such hope and grandmother love, was sold at public auction to cover my mounting legal debts. Strangers walked through rooms filled with 30 years of child advocacy, memories commenting on the excessive number of family photographs and the outdated child development books I had collected throughout my career. My remaining possessions were scattered across the lawn like the remnants of a life that no longer mattered. Professional certifications awards for excellence in child life services, letters of gratitude from families whose children I had helped through medical trauma, all reduced to lot numbers in an estate sale that drew curious neighbors eager to witness the fall of someone who had once been respected in their community. The homeless shelter was a crowded, impersonal facility where I became just another elderly woman whose family had abandoned her. I lay on a thin mattress, listening to the sounds of other broken lives, trying to reconcile the woman I had been with, the reality of my current circumstances, but perhaps the cruelest blow was yet to come. Michael and Jennifer orchestrated a public relations event that weaponized my other grandchildren against me in the most systematic way possible. They leveraged 8-year-old Ethan and 6-year-old Chloe in a charity event for something called the Child Protection Alliance, an organization supposedly dedicated to protective parenting and safeguarding children from emotional manipulation. I learned about the event from a former colleague who sent me a link with a warning that I might not want to watch, but I couldn't resist the desperate need to see my grandchildren, even if it meant witnessing my own destruction. There was Ethan, standing confidently at a small podium, delivering a speech that had clearly been written by adults and rehearsed for maximum emotional impact. Sometimes there are people in families who think they know better than parents about what's good for children. He said, his young voice steady and confident. Brave parents have to protect their children from difficult people who don't understand that children need space to grow. It's important to support parents who make hard choices to keep their families safe and healthy. 6-year-old Chloe followed with an art presentation displaying a drawing of a happy, protected family that conspicuously excluded any figure that could represent me. This is my picture of what families look like when children are safe from confusing people, she explained to the audience with heartbreaking innocence. When parents are strong enough to keep sad, angry people away so children can be happy. The message was unmistakable. I was the threat from which children needed protection, the confusing person whose love was actually manipulation, the source of family dysfunction that required organized intervention. My own grandchildren, whom I had once hoped to guide through life's challenges with professional expertise and grandmother wisdom, had been programmed to see me as someone dangerous and emotionally harmful. This public display of coached emotional distance by children I adored felt like a wound that would never heal. Ethan and Chloe had been manipulated into participating in my destruction without understanding what they were doing. Their innocence corrupted to serve Jennifer's narrative of protective parenting and child welfare. As I sat in the shelter that night, surrounded by the sounds of other people's despair, I felt myself sinking into a darkness so profound that I began to understand why some people simply stopped fighting. The combination of legal threats, financial ruin, professional destruction, and family rejection felt like more than any human being should be expected to endure. But then, like a miracle emerging from my darkest moment, my phone rang with a call that would change everything. The voice belonged to Dr. Sarah Chen, a young woman I had trained as a child life specialist 15 years ago when she was just starting her career in pediatric psychology. She was now a respected leader in child welfare advocacy, and she had been following my situation with growing alarm and disbelief. "Rose," she said, her voice filled with warmth and absolute certainty. "I've been watching what's happening to you, and I want you to know that none of it makes sense to anyone who actually knows your character and professional methods. You saved my career when I was a struggling new specialist. You taught me that child protection sometimes means making unpopular decisions, that true advocacy requires both compassion and courage, and that our responsibility is always to the truth, not to adult comfort." Sarah offered immediate financial support to help me mount a proper legal defense, and more importantly, she connected me with a network of retired legal professionals who specialized in elder abuse, family manipulation, and professional defamation cases. For the first time in months, I was hearing voices of people who understood that my love for Lily was not obsession, but the natural devotion of a grandmother who had been systematically excluded from her grandchild's life through sophisticated psychological warfare. We've seen cases like this before. One of the attorneys told me during our first consultation. Adult children who use advanced legal and psychological tactics to isolate elderly family members for control purposes. What makes your case particularly disturbing is the level of professional manipulation involved and the corruption of child welfare concepts, but that also means there will be documented evidence we can analyze and challenge. As I hung up the phone that night, something fierce and determined stirred within me for the first time since the restraining order had been issued. Jennifer and Michael thought they had broken me completely, erased me from their family's story, silenced my voice forever. But they had forgotten something crucial about child life specialists. We don't just comfort children. We protect them, document concerning behaviors, and ensure that truth eventually prevails when their welfare is truly at stake. The war for my dignity and my granddaughter's future was about to enter its final phase, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I had weapons that could match Jennifer's sophisticated arsenal of lies and manipulation. Sarah's support had rekindled hope within me, but Jennifer's campaign of destruction was entering a new and more sophisticated phase. If anything, my small network of allies seemed to motivate her to escalate her efforts in ways that demonstrated just how calculating and comprehensive her plan to erase me had become. What Jennifer orchestrated next was so professionally devastating and personally cruel that it revealed the true scope of her psychological warfare. She leveraged Michael's social standing in their community and cultivated a network of ethically compromised child psychologists to organize what she called a childhood resilience and protective parenting seminar. The event was positioned as a prestigious regional conference, bringing together parenting experts, child development specialists, and family therapists to discuss contemporary approaches to child protection and safeguarding children from outdated psychological philosophies. But I quickly recognized it as an elaborate public execution of my professional legacy and life's work. Michael was announced as the keynote speaker, presenting what he described as a revolutionary case study on fostering childhood independence and emotional resilience. Though he never mentioned our family by name, every detail was clearly based on Lily's early childhood and my supposed interference in her development, but twisted beyond recognition to support their narrative. Today, I want to share how our family overcame the challenge of well-meaning but emotionally damaging influences from previous generations. Michael announced to an audience of hundreds with thousands more watching the live stream. Sometimes professional expertise can become personal obsession, and caring can become controlling, especially when older family members struggle to accept that child development methods have evolved beyond their training. I learned about the seminar from Sarah, who had been monitoring Jennifer and Michael's activities and was horrified by what she discovered. "Rose," she said, her voice shaking with anger, "they're using your own professional principles against you. Everything you taught about child emotional development and family support systems, they're twisting into evidence of inappropriate psychological manipulation." From my small room in transitional housing that Sarah had helped me secure, I watched the seminar's live stream on a borrowed tablet, witnessing the systematic dismantling of everything I had believed about child welfare and family love. Michael stood confidently at the podium, presenting himself as a visionary parent who had protected his daughter's emotional development, despite the challenges of over-involved extended family members. Traditional child life approaches, Michael said with practiced authority, often emphasize emotional dependency and excessive caretaker involvement that can actually harm a child's ability to develop healthy independence and resilience. We see this particularly in older caregivers who mistake professional concern for personal entitlement and therapeutic support for emotional manipulation. Every word was calculated to portray my 30 years of child advocacy expertise as outdated at best, emotionally damaging at worst. He spoke about the danger of therapeutic overreach by family members and the importance of protecting children from adults who project their own psychological needs onto vulnerable young minds through professional authority. Jennifer appeared alongside Michael, providing what she called real-world examples of how families could overcome generational trauma caused by professionally trained relatives who couldn't respect contemporary parenting boundaries. Her performance was masterful, positioning herself as a protective mother who had courageously defended her daughter from psychological manipulation disguised as grandmother expertise. What we discovered, Jennifer told the interviewer with practiced vulnerability, was that some family members were using their supposed professional credentials to justify inappropriate emotional demands on our daughter. They would claim that their years of training gave them special insight into her needs, but really they were projecting their own need for control and professional validation onto our family dynamic. But the most devastating moment came when they introduced video testimonials from Ethan himself. My 8-year-old grandson appeared in a carefully produced segment that had obviously been professionally filmed and extensively coached. I like being independent and making my own choices about feelings, Ethan said, looking directly into the camera with the practiced confidence of a child who had been repeatedly rehearsed. I don't need people to always ask me about my emotions or try to help me understand things I already know. My mommy and daddy help me be strong without making everything complicated. The subtext was unmistakable. My professional approach to understanding children's emotional needs was being reframed as psychological intrusion. My child life specialist training portrayed as outdated interference that prevented healthy child development. My own grandson was being used to publicly declare that professional emotional support was unnecessary and potentially harmful. Chloe's appearance was even more calculated and cruel. Now 6 years old and clearly influenced by months of Jennifer's narrative, she appeared in a short video clip, giggling as she held up one of my old child development textbooks. Grandma Rose used to make us look at these boring old books about feelings and talking about scary things, she said with childish disdain that was clearly rehearsed but delivered with convincing spontaneity. But we learned that all that old-fashioned feeling stuff just makes kids worried. We prefer independent learning that lets children figure things out themselves. The audience laughed appreciatively at her youthful wisdom, never knowing they were witnessing a child who had been systematically programmed to reject her grandmother's life's work. Everything I had tried to teach my grandchildren about the importance of emotional processing and psychological safety was being reframed as outdated, anxiety-inducing practices that held children back. As the seminar continued, I sat trembling in my chair, watching decades of professional accomplishment being perverted into a cautionary tale about the dangers of over-involved grandparents and outdated child psychology methods. Michael fielded questions from the audience with the confidence of someone who had completely convinced himself that he was protecting his daughter from a genuinely harmful influence. How do you deal with family members who refuse to accept contemporary child development approaches? Someone asked from the audience. It's heartbreaking, Michael replied, his voice filled with practiced pain. Sometimes you have to choose between enabling someone's need for professional validation and protecting your child's emotional development. The most loving thing you can do is set firm boundaries, even when other family members try to make you feel guilty for prioritizing your child's psychological well-being over their need to feel professionally relevant. The comments section of the live stream was filled with supportive messages praising Michael and Jennifer's courage in standing up to toxic family dynamics and protecting their daughter from generational psychological manipulation. Thousands of strangers were celebrating the destruction of my professional reputation as if they were witnessing a triumph of modern parenting over outdated therapeutic practices. But something else was happening that Jennifer and Michael couldn't see or control. Sarah had quietly reached out to several of my former colleagues and the families I had served during my 30-year career, people who understood my actual approach to child development and could recognize the distortion being presented at the seminar. Dr. Margaret Thompson, a respected pediatrician who had worked with me on dozens of cases over the years, was watching the seminar with growing disgust and professional alarm. After Michael's presentation ended, she immediately contacted Sarah with an offer to provide expert testimony about my character and methods. What I'm seeing is a sophisticated character assassination designed to exploit public misunderstanding of child life specialist principles. Dr. Thompson told Sarah, everything Michael is describing as Rose's emotional overreach is actually the opposite of her established methods. She was known throughout our professional community for her ability to balance therapeutic support with healthy independence building and age-appropriate emotional development. Other child development professionals were reaching similar conclusions. The very sophistication of Michael and Jennifer's attack was beginning to work against them, revealing patterns that experienced specialists recognized as manipulation rather than legitimate concern about outdated practices. As I closed the tablet that evening, unable to watch any more of my life's work being perverted into evidence of my supposed harmfulness to children, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began, a cold, analytical understanding of what Jennifer and Michael were really doing. They weren't just trying to exclude me from Lily's life or protect her from an allegedly harmful influence. This was a systematic attempt to rewrite the entire narrative of professional child advocacy, positioning themselves as enlightened modern parents who had overcome the emotional manipulation of previous generations through courage and contemporary wisdom. But in their eagerness to completely destroy my professional legacy, they had also created a documented trail of their own manipulation tactics that could be analyzed and exposed by people who truly understood child development and family dynamics. For the first time since the restraining order had been issued, I began to think like the child life specialist I had been, rather than the heartbroken grandmother I had become. And what I saw gave me the first real hope I had felt in months. Michael and Jennifer were overplaying their hand, and people who truly understood children and families were beginning to notice the disturbing patterns in their behavior. The success of the Childhood Resilience Seminar seemed to embolden Michael and Jennifer for what could only be described as total financial warfare. The public attention and professional validation they had received from positioning themselves as enlightened parents protecting their child from outdated psychological manipulation had fed something dark and insatiable within them. They weren't content with excluding me from Lily's life or destroying my professional reputation. They wanted complete economic annihilation, the total erasure of every resource I might use to fight back. The final assault came in the form of a lawsuit so comprehensive and vindictive that it took my breath away. Michael filed a $1 million claim against me, alleging intentional infliction of emotional distress and systematic defamation, resulting from what he characterized as my decades-long campaign of psychological manipulation and professional exploitation of their family. The lawsuit was frivolous, but legally sophisticated, designed to force me into massive legal fees that would completely drain whatever resources Sarah's support network had temporarily provided. Michael's attorney had crafted the complaint with surgical precision, weaving together fabricated accusations about my child development methods with careful legal language that made my past sacrifices for their family sound like evidence of controlling and professionally manipulative behavior. The defendant has engaged in a pattern of psychological and financial manipulation spanning decades. The lawsuit claimed using her supposed professional expertise and claimed sacrifices to exert inappropriate control over the plaintiff's family life and child-rearing decisions, causing severe emotional distress and reputational damage. But the financial attack extended far beyond the lawsuit itself. Michael had systematically contacted my former hospital, my professional liability insurance company, and even my pension fund administrators, filing detailed complaints that painted me as mentally incompetent and professionally dangerous. We have serious concerns about Rose Matthews' cognitive state and her fitness to have been involved in child psychology. Michael wrote in letters that were somehow leaked to professional publications. Her recent obsessive behavior toward our family suggests possible dementia or other cognitive impairments that may have affected her professional judgment for years. We believe there may be undisclosed incidents with other families that warrant investigation. The bureaucratic machinery moved with terrifying efficiency. Within weeks, I received official notification that my child life specialist pension was being suspended pending a competency evaluation and investigation into potential professional misconduct. My child care certifications were revoked based on Michael's allegations of gross ethical violations and inappropriate emotional attachment to clients' families. 30 years of flawless professional service, thousands of children successfully supported through medical trauma, decades of grateful families whose lives I had enriched and guided through their darkest moments, all erased with a few administrative signatures based on the lies of a son who had no memory of how I had saved his life and secured his future. Without my pension, facing legal fees that multiplied daily, with my professional reputation destroyed and my ability to earn income eliminated, I faced complete financial ruin. The transitional housing facility Sarah had helped me secure was no longer affordable, and I found myself facing homelessness once again. The eviction from my final refuge was orchestrated with deliberate cruelty designed to maximize my public humiliation. Brenda, Jennifer's mother, had somehow arranged for local media coverage of my removal, ensuring that my personal disgrace was documented and broadcast throughout our community. The image of a former child life specialist carrying her few remaining possessions in garbage bags appeared in local newspapers under headlines like "Child Psychology Professional Unable to Care for Herself" and "Former Specialist's Obsession Leads to Homelessness." The photos were deliberately framed to make me appear frail, confused, and potentially dangerous, supporting Jennifer's narrative about my declining mental state. I returned to the crowded overnight shelter where I was surrounded by the sounds of other broken lives. The contrast between my current circumstances and the respect I had once commanded in professional child advocacy circles was so stark that it felt surreal, like watching someone else's nightmare unfold in slow motion. Michael and Jennifer's response to my complete destitution was perhaps more painful than their active cruelty had been. They maintained a chilling indifference to my homelessness that revealed the depth of their emotional disconnection from the woman who had raised and protected them. When approached by a sympathetic journalist who asked about their mother's and mother-in-law's situation, Michael publicly stated that he had no legal or moral obligation to support someone who refuses to take responsibility for the consequences of their own inappropriate professional behavior. My mother made choices that led to this situation, he said, his voice cold and emotionless during a brief television interview. She chose to pursue an obsessive professional relationship with our child rather than respect our boundaries as parents. We can't sacrifice our family's well-being to enable her continued inability to accept appropriate limits on her therapeutic involvement. Jennifer's response was equally heartless, but more calculated in its cruelty. She maintained an active social media presence, showcasing their happy family life, carefully posting images of Lily's developmental milestones and family activities that conspicuously excluded any reference to my existence. When followers asked about the grandmother situation they had heard about in the news, Jennifer would respond with carefully crafted statements about hoping everyone gets the mental health support they need and focusing on positive relationships that support our daughter's emotional growth. But perhaps the most twisted demonstration of their complete victory came when Brenda used funds that had been intended for Lily's future education to purchase what she called a child wellness center in my granddaughter's name. The facility, complete with modern therapeutic equipment and educational resources, was built using money that Michael and Jennifer had received through various fundraising efforts and family financial support that had originally been meant to secure Lily's long-term development. The grand opening was a highly publicized community event that Brenda promoted as a symbol of protective parenting and child advocacy. She spoke at the dedication ceremony about Jennifer's strength and vision in protecting her daughter from harmful psychological influences, while standing in a building that had been purchased with resources originally intended to benefit the granddaughter I was now forbidden to see. Photographs of the gleaming facility, complete with a bronze plaque dedicating it to modern child development principles and protective family relationships, were shared widely across Brenda's social media platforms. She stood proudly at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by community leaders and fellow parents who praised the family's commitment to child welfare, never knowing they were celebrating a monument built on the systematic destruction of a grandmother's relationship with her granddaughter. The physical and emotional toll of this relentless siege finally overwhelmed my body's ability to cope. One morning in the shelter, as I struggled to get dressed with hands that shook from constant stress and malnutrition, a crushing pain seized my chest. The room spun around me, and I collapsed onto the concrete floor, my body finally surrendering to the immense pressure I had been carrying for months. The heart attack was severe and nearly fatal. I was rushed to the emergency room unconscious, my life hanging by a thread, while Jennifer's social media followers continued to celebrate her latest posts about Lily's development and their family's happiness. For hours, I drifted between consciousness and darkness, isolated and abandoned by everyone except Sarah and the small network of professionals who had begun to see through Jennifer and Michael's elaborate deception. But even in my unconscious state, my mind was working through the devastating realization that had been building for months. As I lay barely clinging to life, I experienced a vivid dreamlike memory that felt more real than my present circumstances. I was back in my office 15 years ago, conducting a family therapy session that had troubled me for weeks afterward. The case involved a mother who had successfully convinced Child Protective Services, family court, and even medical professionals that her ex-husband was emotionally abusive and potentially dangerous to their children through inappropriate therapeutic relationships. The woman's tactics had been sophisticated and systematic, documenting concerning behaviors that were actually normal parental emotional support, reframing the father's professional child psychology training as manipulation tactics, and using clinical-sounding language to make her allegations seem credible and objective to authorities. In my dream, the fragmented pieces of that old case suddenly coalesced into a complete chilling realization. Jennifer's methods, her systematic documentation of my supposed inappropriate professional behavior, her alliance with legal and medical professionals, her reframing of grandmother love as psychological manipulation were identical to the patterns I had professionally witnessed in that disturbing case from years past. She wasn't simply a protective mother establishing reasonable boundaries with an intrusive relative. This was sophisticated psychological warfare being executed by someone who understood exactly how to manipulate family court systems, professional opinions, and public perception to achieve complete control while maintaining the appearance of child protection. The recognition hit me like lightning, even in my unconscious state. I had spent my career protecting children from exactly this kind of systematic manipulation, and now I was the target of the most sophisticated campaign of psychological abuse I had ever encountered. As I lay there barely alive, that realization ignited something deep within me, the same professional instincts that had protected countless children during my 3-decade career. My body might be failing, but my understanding of what Jennifer was doing had become crystal clear. I had dedicated my life to ensuring children's emotional welfare and exposing those who would harm them through manipulation and deceit. Now, even if it killed me, I was going to use everything I had learned to expose the most dangerous family manipulator I had ever encountered, the one who was systematically destroying her own child's relationship with her grandmother. My recovery from the heart attack was slow and painful, but it brought with it a clarity of purpose I hadn't possessed since Lily's birth. Sarah and her network of professionals had been quietly building a case that would expose Jennifer's systematic manipulation while I lay in that hospital bed, finally understanding the true scope of what we were fighting against. From my hospital room, surrounded by machines monitoring my fragile heart, I made a decision that would either restore my relationship with my granddaughter or complete my destruction. With the help of Maria, a compassionate nurse who had become invested in my story after hearing about the case from Sarah, I recorded a raw, emotional video message that laid out the truth about Jennifer's character and the lengths to which she had gone to erase me from Lily's life. My voice was still weak from the heart attack, occasionally trembling with exhaustion, but my words carried the weight of professional authority earned through 3 decades of child advocacy and a grandmother's desperate love. Michael, I began looking directly into the camera despite my physical frailty. I know Jennifer has convinced you that I'm a danger to your family, but I need you to understand something that she has never wanted you to know about Lily's first year of life. I played carefully selected excerpts from the security camera recordings that had captured Jennifer's calculated discussions about excluding me from Lily's life and her chilling expression of death wishes after my accident. Her voice clear and unmistakable, revealed the cold manipulation behind her claims of protective parenting. "Listen to her tone," I said, pausing the recording. "That's not the voice of a mother protecting her child from a genuinely harmful influence. That's someone strategically planning to isolate a family member for control purposes. This is your wife calculating how to eliminate me from Lily's life while making it appear that she's acting in her best interest." I revealed carefully measured details about Lily's hidden medical history, explaining how her life had hung in the balance during those first critical months, and how I had quietly arranged and paid for the experimental treatments that saved her. I provided enough documentation to prove my claims without compromising ongoing legal strategies. I spent every penny of my remaining savings to ensure that Lily would survive her first year. I said, my voice strengthening with conviction. I arranged for specialists, coordinated complex medical procedures, and managed insurance issues that would have bankrupted your young family. I never asked for gratitude or recognition. But now, Jennifer is using my love for the child whose life I saved as evidence that I'm obsessed and dangerous. The video ended with a direct appeal to whatever remained of Michael's filial love and basic human decency. "Please," I said, tears streaming down my face, but my voice steady, "don't let her rewrite our entire family history. Don't let Lily grow up believing that her grandmother was a threat rather than the person who ensured she survived to have a future." Maria helped me send the video to Michael's personal email account, bypassing Jennifer's social media channels and public personas to reach him directly. We waited anxiously for some response, hoping that finally seeing irrefutable evidence of Jennifer's manipulation might break through the wall of lies she had built around my son. But our hope was catastrophically misplaced. Jennifer, who had somehow gained access to Michael's electronic communications through sophisticated monitoring software, intercepted my message before he could see it. What she did next demonstrated a level of technical sophistication and calculated cruelty that revealed the true extent of her psychological warfare capabilities. Jennifer took my raw emotional video and my carefully preserved audio evidence and systematically manipulated them using professional-grade digital editing software. She altered the pacing and inflection of my voice to make me sound paranoid and irrational. She spliced segments out of context, added unsettling background music, and cut sentences to completely change their meaning. The result was a grotesque distortion of my message that made me appear delusional, vindictive, and potentially dangerous. My desperate pleas for truth were reframed as grandiose paranoid fantasies and manipulative attempts to blackmail family members with fabricated medical claims. The audio evidence of Jennifer's manipulation was either removed entirely or distorted beyond recognition. Jennifer then sold this heavily doctored video to a prominent national tabloid news program, presenting it as exclusive evidence of my complete mental breakdown and the dangerous delusions of an elderly woman who had lost all touch with reality. This heartbreaking video shows just how far my mother-in-law's mental illness has progressed. Jennifer told the news anchor with perfectly practiced concern. She's now creating elaborate conspiracy theories involving secret medical procedures and hidden family finances. She's even claiming that she somehow saved Lily's life when my daughter was perfectly healthy at birth. It's devastating to watch someone deteriorate this way. The story went viral within hours, spreading across multiple news networks and social media platforms. Commentators discussed my tragic decline and the impossible position Jennifer and Michael faced in dealing with a family member who had clearly lost her grip on reality. The manipulated video was played repeatedly each viewing, further cementing the narrative of my mental instability and Jennifer's patient victimhood. But Jennifer wasn't satisfied with simply discrediting my message. She convinced Michael to appear on national television for what she called a healing interview about the challenges of dealing with elderly family members who develop obsessive delusions about grandchildren. I watched in complete horror as my son, tears streaming down his face, expressed profound sadness over my deteriorating condition and asked the public to respect their family's privacy during this incredibly difficult time. My mother was once a brilliant, capable woman. Michael said, his voice breaking with what appeared to be genuine emotion, but was actually carefully rehearsed performance. But something has changed dramatically in recent years. She's become completely obsessed with conspiracy theories about our family and convinced that everyone is plotting against her. It's heartbreaking to watch someone you love lose their connection to reality this way. Michael brought 8-year-old Ethan onto the camera, with him my grandson looking appropriately sad and concerned, as he delivered what were clearly coached lines about wishing Grandma Rose could get the help she needs and hoping she can find peace instead of being angry all the time. The interview was a masterpiece of manipulation, portraying Jennifer as the long-suffering daughter-in-law trying to protect her family from an increasingly unstable relative, and Michael as the devoted son, torn between love and necessary self-protection. Brenda appeared alongside them, offering professional credibility to their narrative about my supposed mental decline. Sometimes, Brenda said with practiced sympathy, loving someone means protecting both them and yourself from the harm that untreated mental illness can cause. We're hoping Rose will eventually accept the help she needs, but we can't sacrifice our daughter's emotional security while we wait for that to happen. The national interview succeeded in cementing my public image as a delusional, potentially dangerous woman whose own family had been forced to take legal action for their own safety. Any attempt I might make to defend myself would now be dismissed as further evidence of my deteriorating mental state and my inability to accept reality. But something was happening that Jennifer couldn't control or manipulate. Sarah's network of child development professionals had been quietly analyzing Jennifer's digital manipulation techniques and building a comprehensive case that exposed her sophisticated fraud operation. Most importantly, Dr. Evans, my longtime primary care physician, who had treated both Michael and Lily throughout their lives, had been carefully reviewing the medical records that proved Lily's complex early medical needs. His documentation of the expensive experimental treatments, the specialist consultations, and the extensive medical bills that had been mysteriously paid by anonymous benefactors provided irrefutable evidence of Jennifer's deception about Lily's medical history. Your daughter-in-law has been lying about fundamental facts regarding her daughter's medical care, Dr. Evans told Sarah during a confidential briefing. The records clearly show that Lily required extensive, expensive treatments that the family couldn't afford. Someone paid those bills, and based on the timing and the financial patterns, it was obviously Mrs. Matthews using her own resources. Dr. Evans's investigation had also uncovered evidence of Jennifer's attempts to manipulate medical records and suppress information about Lily's early health challenges. She's been systematically trying to erase any evidence that her daughter was ever seriously ill, which suggests she knows exactly how damaging the truth would be to her narrative. As I sat in Sarah's guest room that night, still weak from the heart attack, but mentally clearer than I had been in months, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the car accident, a cold professional determination to expose the truth regardless of the personal cost. Jennifer had made a critical error in her eagerness to destroy me completely. In creating such an elaborate and public campaign of character assassination, she had also created a documented trail of sophisticated manipulation that could be analyzed and exposed by experts who understood exactly what she was doing. The war for my dignity and my gran. Rose's heartbreak when love becomes a weapon. My recovery from the heart attack had been slow but transformative, giving me not just physical strength, but an unwavering clarity about what needed to be done. Sarah's support network had grown into a formidable legal team, and through careful investigation, we had discovered a legal settlement I had forgotten about from a malpractice case decades ago that provided the resources we needed for a proper counterattack. I hired 3 of the most respected professionals in their fields: Dr. Margaret Chen, a renowned child psychologist who specialized in family manipulation cases; Robert Walsh, a veteran family law attorney whose reputation for exposing elder abuse was legendary; and Dr. Evans himself, who had finally found the courage to stand with truth rather than Jennifer's intimidation. Together, we launched a massive federal civil and criminal lawsuit against Jennifer Michael and their accomplices for emotional child abuse, elder abuse, parental alienation, and national defamation. The case immediately attracted global attention, not just because of the viral nature of Jennifer's previous campaigns, but because it represented a landmark challenge to sophisticated psychological warfare conducted against vulnerable, elderly family members. The trial began on a crisp January morning, with the courthouse packed to capacity and cameras broadcasting the proceedings worldwide. As I walked into that courtroom supported by Sarah and my legal team, I felt the weight of every grandmother who had been systematically excluded from their grandchildren's lives, every elderly person who had been silenced by family members who exploited their love and trust. Jennifer and Michael entered with their remaining legal support, still projecting confidence despite the mounting evidence against them. They had no idea what was waiting for them. When Dr. Chen stood to present our opening evidence, the courtroom fell into expectant silence. "Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying the authority of decades of experience in family psychology. "We have audio and video evidence that will demonstrate the systematic psychological warfare conducted against Rose Matthews by individuals who exploited her maternal love to commit serious crimes against her person, her reputation, and her fundamental right to love her grandchild." The first piece of evidence was a revelation that stunned even me. During my months of preparation for living with Lily, during Jennifer's maternity leave, I had purchased what appeared to be a simple bedside alarm clock for the guest room, not realizing it contained a hidden recording device installed by the manufacturer for security purposes. The device had been recording continuously, capturing conversations and interactions that no one knew were being documented. The audio began to play through speakers positioned around the courtroom. Jennifer's voice, clear and unmistakable, filled the space as she spoke to 6-year-old Lily with chilling calculation. "Now listen carefully, sweetheart," Jennifer's recorded voice said with practiced manipulation. "When Grandma Rose asks you about missing her, you need to tell her exactly what I taught you to say. Can you remember the words?" Lily's small, confused voice responded hesitantly. "Mommy wished Grandma died so she wouldn't bother anyone anymore." "That's right, baby. And if she gets upset, that just proves she's a bad person who doesn't care about our feelings. Good girls help their mommies by telling the truth about difficult people." The courtroom was completely silent as this conversation played, the only sound being the occasional gasp from spectators who were witnessing the systematic corruption of a child's innocence. But the recording continued capturing Jennifer's immediate aftermath conversation with Michael. "She'll be devastated when Lily says that," Jennifer told Michael with satisfaction. "The timing is perfect while she's still weak from the accident. This will establish immediately that she's inappropriate around children and can't handle emotional situations properly." Michael's response revealed the depth of his complicity and moral bankruptcy. "Just make sure Lily understands she's helping protect our family. I don't want her feeling guilty later about hurting Mom's feelings." "Don't worry," Jennifer replied with cold efficiency. "By the time I'm finished, Lily will believe that hurting Rose's feelings is actually an act of family loyalty. Children are so easy to reprogram when you understand basic psychology." The recording captured hours of similar conversations, showing Jennifer systematically coaching Lily to fear me, distrust me, and participate in my emotional destruction while believing she was protecting her family. The corruption of my granddaughter's natural love was documented in horrifying detail. When Dr. Evans was called to testify, the combination of audio evidence and his own medical records completely validated our case. Confronted with recordings of Jennifer threatening his medical license if he didn't support her narrative, he broke down completely on the witness stand. She convinced me that Mrs. Matthews was exhibiting concerning attachment behaviors that could harm the child. Dr. Evans sobbed his career and reputation crumbling in real time. But I had Lily's complete medical file from birth. I knew about the experimental surgery, the life-threatening condition, the massive medical bills that someone had paid anonymously. Jennifer threatened to destroy my practice if I revealed any of that information. Dr. Evans's confession opened the floodgates for other medical professionals to reveal how Jennifer had manipulated their opinions and suppressed crucial information about Lily's medical history. Mrs. Matthews saved that child's life. Dr. Evans continued, his voice breaking. She spent over $200,000 on experimental treatments, while Jennifer and Michael believed insurance was covering everything. The grandmother they're portraying as dangerous actually ensured their daughter would live to see her first birthday. When Jennifer was finally called to testify in her own defense, the transformation was shocking and complete. The confident manipulator who had entered the courtroom was gone, replaced by someone who appeared to be having a total psychological breakdown. Confronted with hours of her own recorded words and the testimony of her co-conspirators, Jennifer's carefully constructed facade shattered entirely. I was just trying to protect my family," she stammered, her voice barely audible as tears streamed down her face. "Rose was so controlling, so demanding. I felt like she was trying to take Lily away from me, like she thought she knew better than Lily's actual mother. But as more recordings played, revealing the calculated nature of her campaign against me and the deliberate corruption of Lily's emotional development, Jennifer's composure completely disintegrated. She began sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking as the full magnitude of her psychological warfare was exposed for the world to see. "I never meant for it to go this far," she wailed, her voice breaking with what appeared to be genuine horror at her own actions. "I just wanted to be the most important person in Lily's life. I wanted to be her only grandmother." The sight of her complete collapse was both vindicating and heartbreaking. This was the woman who had systematically destroyed my relationship with my granddaughter, who had corrupted a child's mind with hatred and fear, reduced to a broken shell by the exposure of her own cruelty. Michael's breakdown was even more devastating to witness. Hearing the recordings of his own voice, dismissing my love as manipulation, seeing the evidence of his active participation in Jennifer's campaign. He crumbled completely under the weight of his betrayal. "Oh God," he whispered, his face buried in his hands, as his shoulders shook with silent sobs. "What have I done? What have we done to you, Mom? You saved Lily's life, and we turned that love into a weapon against you." Davies, their lawyer, attempted to flee the courtroom when he realized the scope of the evidence against him, but was apprehended by court security. His collapse into desperate tears and complete disgrace revealed his role as more than just a legal representative. He had been a knowing participant in the systematic abuse of an elderly woman. As the day's testimony concluded and the court recessed, I sat surrounded by my legal team, feeling something I hadn't experienced in nearly 4 years, the profound relief that comes from having the truth finally heard and believed. The evidence was overwhelming, Jennifer's guilt was undeniable, and my vindication was complete. But even in that moment of triumph, I couldn't forget the cost of this victory. My family was shattered. My relationship with Lily had been stolen during her most formative years, and my grandchildren would grow up knowing that their mother had systematically tried to destroy their grandmother's love for them. 4. The truth had finally prevailed, but the price of that truth would echo through our family for generations to come. The verdict came after 4 days of deliberation, delivered by Judge Margaret Foster, with the gravity and moral authority that such a comprehensive case of family manipulation demanded. The courtroom was packed with spectators, media representatives, and advocates for elder rights and child protection who had been following the trial as a landmark case in family law. The evidence presented in this case, Judge Foster declared, her voice ringing with moral indignation, reveals a pattern of elder abuse and child psychological manipulation so systematic, so calculated, and so cruel that it represents one of the most disturbing examples of family betrayal this court has ever encountered. The defendants orchestrated a sophisticated campaign designed not only to sever the natural bond between grandmother and grandchild, but to weaponize that child's own emotions against the woman who had literally saved her life. Jennifer was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison for elder abuse, emotional child abuse, parental alienation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Her sentence was enhanced due to the sophisticated nature of her psychological manipulation and the extensive use of legal and medical systems to harm her victims. Michael received 6 years for his active complicity in the campaign, his sentence reflecting both his participation and his eventual cooperation with the investigation. The financial restitution was comprehensive and decisive. Jennifer and Michael were ordered to pay for all my medical expenses, from the stress-induced heart attack, my legal fees, the costs of my homelessness and emotional trauma, and punitive damages totaling over $3 million. The court also ordered the immediate dissolution of the Child Wellness Center that had been built with misappropriated funds, with those resources redirected to organizations supporting grandparent rights. But beyond the financial restoration, the court issued something even more precious to me: complete vindication of my character and professional integrity. Judge Foster's written opinion was a scathing condemnation of Jennifer's actions and a comprehensive restoration of my reputation. Rose Matthews, the judge wrote, represents the finest qualities of professional child advocacy and maternal devotion. She devoted her career to protecting and nurturing children through their most vulnerable moments, and she made extraordinary personal sacrifices to ensure her granddaughter's survival and well-being. The abuse she suffered represents not just a crime against an individual, but an attack on the fundamental bonds that hold families together and the respect owed to those who dedicate their lives to caring for others. The legal vindication felt like a spiritual cleansing. After 4 years of being portrayed as a mentally unstable, dangerous woman whose love was actually manipulation, the legal system had formally recognized not only my innocence, but my exemplary character and the extraordinary sacrifices I had made for my family. Dr. Evans lost his medical license and faced criminal charges for his participation in Jennifer's medical fraud and intimidation campaign. Davies was permanently disbarred and sentenced to 5 years for his role in manipulating the legal system to commit elder abuse. Brenda received 4 years for her conspiracy and active participation in the campaign against me. From prison, Jennifer sent me a letter that revealed the true depths of her psychological and moral collapse. Her handwriting was erratic, her thoughts scattered and desperate. "Rose," she wrote, "I know I have no right to ask for anything from you, but I'm begging for your forgiveness. I was so jealous of your relationship with Lily, so threatened by your professional expertise and your natural grandmother bond with her. I convinced myself that you were trying to steal her from me, but I see now that I was the one who stole her from you." The letter continued for several pages, detailing her growing understanding of the magnitude of what she had destroyed and her complete isolation from any source of love or support. "I destroyed the woman who saved my daughter's life because I was too insecure to share Lily's love with anyone else. I turned my husband against his own mother and corrupted my daughter's understanding of family love. I see now what I really am, and I don't know how to live with it." Reading her letter, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction in seeing justice served, but also genuine sadness for the broken woman Jennifer had revealed herself to be. I had never wanted to destroy her. I had simply wanted to love my granddaughter without interference. Michael's journey toward redemption was more hopeful but equally complex. From his rehabilitation facility, he sent me a series of letters that showed genuine remorse and growing self-awareness about his role in the family's destruction. "Mom," he wrote in his first letter, "I spend every day trying to understand how I could have chosen Jennifer's manipulation over your love, how I could have believed that the woman who raised me and literally saved my life and Lily's life was suddenly a threat to my family. I was a coward who chose the easy path of agreeing with Jennifer rather than standing up for what I knew was right." He detailed his therapy sessions where he was working to understand the psychological techniques Jennifer had used to turn him against me and his own daughter against her grandmother. The therapist says I was a victim of manipulation too, but that doesn't excuse my choices. I was an adult who should have protected you instead of participating in your destruction. Michael's letters became a regular part of my healing process, each one showing progress in his understanding of family dynamics and his commitment to eventual reconciliation. While full restoration of our relationship remained distant, I could see genuine change in his thinking and genuine remorse for the pain he had caused. Lily's healing journey was perhaps the most delicate and important aspect of our family's reconstruction. Now 7 years old, she had spent her most formative years believing that her grandmother was someone to be feared and avoided. The revelation of how she had been manipulated was traumatic, but it also opened the door to authentic relationship building. Grandma Rose, she said during one of our first supervised visits after the trial, "The judge said you were the one who helped me when I was a sick baby, and that's why I'm alive. Is that why you love me so much?" Her innocent questions broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. Through patient conversation and play therapy, Lily began to understand that the grandmother she had been taught to fear was actually the person who had ensured her survival and had never stopped loving her despite being kept away. "I'm sorry I said mean things about you," she whispered. During one of our visits, her small arms wrapped around my neck. "I didn't understand that you were trying to help me not hurt me." Ethan and Chloe, now 10 and 8, struggled more with the complex emotions of guilt, betrayal, and confusion about their parents' actions. They had been old enough to remember our close relationship before Jennifer's campaign began, and their participation in my humiliation weighed heavily on their consciences. Grandma Rose, Ethan said during one of our family therapy sessions, "I know what we said about you at that charity thing was wrong, but Mom made it seem like we were protecting Lily. I'm sorry we believed her lies." Through ongoing therapy and patient family work, all 3 of my grandchildren began to understand how they had been used as weapons in an adult conflict that they never should have been exposed to. Their healing would take time, but I could see the foundation of authentic, loving relationships being rebuilt based on truth rather than manipulation. The victory was complete, but it was also profoundly bittersweet. My integrity had been restored, my relationship with my grandchildren was being rebuilt, and justice had been served. But the cost had been enormous. Years of Lily's childhood had been stolen. My relationship with Michael was severely damaged, and the family I had worked so hard to protect and nurture had been shattered by the very people I had trusted most. As I sat in my restored home that first evening after the trial concluded, surrounded by legal documents that vindicated my character and family photographs that had been returned to me, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Lily's birth. Profound peace mixed with deep sadness for all that had been lost in the pursuit of truth. The war was over and justice had prevailed, but the work of healing and rebuilding our family was just beginning. 3 years after the trial that restored my reputation and reunited me with my grandchildren, I find myself living a life I never could have imagined during those dark months of isolation and legal battles. My home completely renovated with the restitution money and filled once again with the sounds of family life has become not just my sanctuary, but a gathering place for a family rebuilt on foundations of truth and genuine love. The house radiates with a different kind of energy, now one that comes from relationships that have been tested by the worst kind of betrayal and emerged stronger through the commitment to healing and honesty. Lily, now 10 years old, spends every weekend with me, and our bond has grown deeper than I ever dared hope during those years when I was forbidden to see her. "Grandma Rose," she said to me recently as we worked together in the therapy garden I had created behind my house, "I'm glad I know the truth now about how much you love me and how you saved my life when I was little. It makes me feel safe in a way I never felt before when I thought you were scary." Her words capture something profound about our relationship now. The love between us isn't just natural affection. It has been tested and proven through the worst circumstances, making it unbreakable in ways that ordinary grandmother relationships might never experience. Ethan and Chloe have become my frequent companions and confidants, seeking me out not just for family activities, but for guidance through their own healing process. They often talk about feeling grateful that the truth was revealed, even though it meant losing the parents they thought they knew. "You teach us that love doesn't mean pretending bad things didn't happen," Chloe told me during one of our evening walks. "You still love Daddy even though he hurt you, But you didn't let that stop you from fighting for what was right. That's what real love looks like. Their understanding of complex family dynamics, learned through trauma, but guided by therapy and honest conversation, has given them wisdom beyond their years about relationships manipulation and the importance of standing up for truth, even when it's difficult. Michael's journey toward redemption continues from his rehabilitation facility, where he's working not just on understanding his own psychological manipulation, but on developing skills for healthy family relationships. His letters have evolved from expressions of guilt to thoughtful reflections on parenting family dynamics and his hopes for eventual reconciliation. I want to be the father Lily, Ethan, and Chloe deserve, he wrote in his most recent letter, and the son you raised me to be. I know that will take years of work and proof through actions, not just words. But I finally understand what family really means, and I want to build something authentic with all of you when I'm ready to deserve that chance. While our relationship remains cautious and long distance, I can see genuine change in his thinking and genuine commitment to becoming someone worthy of his children's respect and love. The work is hard and the timeline uncertain, but there's hope where once there was only betrayal. Jennifer remains in prison, serving her sentence in relative isolation. Her few letters to me have shown increasing mental instability and a desperate need for forgiveness that goes far beyond anything I could provide. The woman who orchestrated such sophisticated psychological warfare has been reduced to someone who can barely maintain coherent thought, destroyed by the magnitude of her own cruelty. I respond to her letters with compassion, but without false hope. Some actions create consequences that cannot be undone, relationships that cannot be restored. Jennifer will have to find her redemption elsewhere, if she can find it at all. Brenda has faded into complete obscurity, her social standing destroyed, and her relationship with her daughter severed by their mutual betrayal. Her isolation serves as a reminder of how manipulation and cruelty ultimately destroy the manipulator as thoroughly as their victims. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation in my life has been my emergence as a national advocate for grandparent rights and elder abuse prevention. My story has become a powerful tool for educating families, legal professionals, and social workers about the sophisticated tactics that can be used to isolate elderly family members from their loved ones. I speak at conferences across the country, sharing my experience with audiences who are dealing with similar situations or working to prevent them. My memoir, The Grandmother's Fight, Love, Loss, and the Power of Truth, has become a bestseller and resource guide for other abuse survivors. Sarah and I founded the Rose Matthews Foundation for Family Justice, which provides legal assistance and emotional support for grandparents who have been systematically excluded from their grandchildren's lives. We work with a network of attorneys, therapists, and advocates who specialize in these complex cases, offering hope to people who thought they had no recourse against sophisticated family manipulation. What happened to you represents the most insidious form of elder abuse, I tell audiences during my speaking engagements. It's not just financial exploitation or physical neglect. It's the systematic destruction of family bonds through psychological manipulation and legal intimidation. But there is always hope, and there are always people willing to fight for justice if you have the courage to seek help. The work is demanding, but deeply fulfilling. Every letter I receive from a grandparent who found the courage to fight for their relationship with their grandchildren. Every successful case, our foundation helps support every family that reunites after being torn apart by manipulation reminds me that my suffering was not meaningless. My days are full and purposeful in ways I never expected after such trauma. Mornings often find me volunteering at the local children's hospital, using my child life specialist training to help families navigate medical crises. Afternoons might be spent in correspondence with other abuse survivors or consulting with attorneys on complex elder abuse cases. Evenings belong to my family. Lily, Ethan, Chloe, and I gather regularly for dinners that are filled with laughter, honest conversation, and the deep contentment that comes from relationships built on truth rather than convenience or fear. As I look back on the journey from my lowest point in that homeless shelter to this life of purpose and authentic connection, I am struck by the resilience of the human spirit and the power of truth to eventually prevail. The trauma I experienced will always be part of my story, but it no longer defines me. Instead, it has become the foundation for a deeper understanding of love, justice, and the importance of fighting for what is right, even when the cost seems unbearable. My grandchildren are growing up understanding that families can survive even the worst betrayals when people commit to honesty and healing. They're learning that love doesn't mean accepting abuse, that respect must be earned through actions, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful behavior. These lessons learned through pain, but resulting in wisdom, will serve them well as they build their own families and face their own challenges. The legacy I'm leaving them isn't just the memory of a grandmother who fought for them, but the knowledge that truth and justice are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. 6 years have passed since that devastating day when Jennifer first coached Lily to wish for my death, and as I sit in my garden this evening, watching my granddaughter help her younger cousins build a fairy house while sharing stories about kindness and truth, I am overwhelmed by the profound transformation that suffering can create when it's met with unwavering commitment to love and justice. My home resonates with the sounds of genuine family connection, rebuilt on a foundation of honesty rather than manipulation or fear. The laughter that fills these rooms now carries a deeper meaning because it's been earned through struggle, forgiveness, and the hard work of authentic relationship building. Each gathering feels precious because we all understand how easily family bonds can be severed by those who would exploit love for their own purposes. The work I do now, helping other grandparents and elderly family members who face systematic exclusion and psychological abuse, has given my later years a purpose I never anticipated. Through our foundation, we have assisted over 2,000 families in recognizing and combating sophisticated manipulation tactics, restored hundreds of grandparent-grandchild relationships, and changed legislation in 15 states to better protect the rights of loving grandparents. My story has become a beacon of hope for those who thought justice was impossible proof that even the most calculated and comprehensive betrayal can be overcome through courage, persistence, and the support of people who believe in the fundamental importance of family love. But more than professional vindication, I have discovered the profound peace that comes from living authentically surrounded by people who love me for who I truly am rather than what I can provide them. The lesson I carry from this journey reaches deeper than simple strategies for protecting oneself from family manipulation. I learned that our greatest strength lies not in avoiding conflict or maintaining false peace, but in having the courage to confront deception and fight for truth when those we love are threatened. Self-worth is indeed an unshakable foundation that no one can take from us without our permission, and authentic family relationships are built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than control or psychological manipulation. I carry no bitterness toward Jennifer or the pain she caused. Bitterness would only poison the peace I have fought so hard to achieve and the relationships I have worked so carefully to rebuild. Instead, I have transformed my deepest trauma into lasting purpose, becoming an advocate for justice and dignity for those who cannot fight for themselves. To anyone listening who may be facing their own family betrayal, who feels isolated and manipulated by those who should cherish them, I want you to know this. Your love matters, your voice has value, and there are people who will stand with you when you find the courage to seek truth and justice. The path may be long and the cost may be high, but it leads to something infinitely precious, a life lived with integrity, authentic relationships built on honesty, and the profound peace that comes from knowing you never compromised your values, even in your darkest hour. That kind of peace earned through struggle and sacrifice becomes a legacy worth leaving for those who come after us. Daughter's future was far from over.